All right, you guys, we're going to continue our discussion of solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So let's take a look at this example. So it says solve using the quadratic formula, and the equation we've been given is 2x squared plus 8x plus 7 equals 0. Okay, so step 1 is to always make sure that our quadratic is given to us in standard form. It is. And the next thing that we need to do is identify a, b, and c. So for this problem, a equals 2, b equals 8, and c equals 7. And we're going to plug that into the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we're going to plug those values in. So we have x equals negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared minus 4 times 2 times 7 all over 2 times 2. And we're going to simplify that. So we have negative 8 plus or minus 64. 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 7 is 56. So minus 56 all over 4. Okay. We're going to clean that up. So we're going to have negative 8 plus or minus. That's going to be 64 minus 56 is 8 all over 4. Okay. Now, the square root of 8 isn't perfect, but it does simplify farther. Okay. So we're going to break that radical down. Okay. So I'm going to do it over here on the side. So the square root of 8, remember we're going to break that number down into primes. So what times 8, that's a prime number. What times a prime number will give you 8? 2 times 4. 4 can be broken down as 2 times 2. All right, since this is a square root, numbers can come out in pairs. And the number that doesn't have a pair needs to be left behind. So the square root of 8 can be simplified as 2 on the square root of 2. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that as negative 8 plus or minus 2 square root of 2 all over 4. Okay. Now, as I'm looking at my coefficients, okay, which are negative 8, 2, and 4, all of those coefficients are evenly divisible by 2. So I need to simplify them. All right. So that's going to give me negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 2 all over 2. Okay. So remember, that's two different answers here. One answer is going to be negative 4 plus the square root of 2 over 2. And the other answer is negative 4 minus the square root of 2 over 2. Okay. Cool. All right, let's try another example. All right. So this problem says solve using the quadratic formula again. So step 1 is to always make sure that our equation has been given to us in standard form. It has. Now we need to identify what a, b, and c are. So for this problem, a is 4, b is 1, and c is 1. And we're going to plug it into the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to plug that in. So we have x equals negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared minus 4 times 1 all over 2 times 4. And we're going to simplify. So it's negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. And negative 16 times 1 is negative 16 all over 8. Okay. Now, once we do this, we're going to need to simplify that quantity that sits underneath the radical. So we have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 15 over 8. Okay. And we're going to simplify that negative under the radical. Okay. So now remember, we know about complex numbers. So what I'm going to do is rewrite this I'm going to separate the negative part out from the positive part of that radical. Okay, and we know that the square root of -1 becomes I. Okay, over 8. Okay, so I didn't break down the square root of 15 any farther because it doesn't simplify any farther. That's why I've left it. Okay, and there's nothing else here that we can simplify. So we just need to remember that this is two separate answers. One of them is -1 plus I square root of 15 over 8. And the other one is -1 minus I square root of 15 over 8. Okay, and those are our two answers. Okay, so be careful if you have a negative expression underneath your radical, because remember, you guys know about complex numbers now. So anytime you have a negative under the radical, you can bring that out by turning the square root of -1 to I. So be careful for that.